How you doing? Hey, did you know that 1985 was International Youth Year?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that?
You did. I did. But I didn't.
Did ye?
I'm part of this future, and I'm going to do something about it.
When you get down to the real world and everybody's sensitivities, they're always scared to think of young people being active politically.
Lots of information that doesn't out like, on the media, through newspaper and television, as well as bullshit really.
The system is weak, destroying all dreams. Flying to the moon, nobody's in the schools doing it. So what's up? It's the blast time. The blast time.
The sort of curriculum that is on offer to black kids has nothing or very little to say about black people's contribution.
...1985 was International Youth Year, and Britain, like other countries in the United Nations, pledged itself to promote the themes of Youth Year: participation, development and peace. However, like many initiatives that come from on high, Youth Year failed to reach the very people it was designed to help. The majority of young people seemed unaware that it was Youth Year. It was the year of the bed and breakfast legislation, the Green Paper on Social Security, the spread of MSc and YTS amidst growing youth unemployment, increases in police powers, Live Aid, uprisings in Handsworth, Tottenham and Brixton, and two major reports on racism within the British education system. This programme is not about International Youth Year, but about those issues which affected young people in 1985 and will continue to affect them for the foreseeable future. Participation. International Youth Year said that participation is about taking control of those things that affect you and not just leaving them to those in the know. Now, do you think that school really prepares young people for taking control over their own lives? Or is it the case that schools actually condition young people to accept authority? For example, how much control do you have over the kind of things that you learn and over the way in which you learn those things? How much influence do you have in deciding the rules and the regulations that govern you in school? Don't walk down that corridor. Stand up straight when I'm talking to you. Does school really prepare young people for life after school? Does it really give them the skills and experience that they need in order to be full and active, participating members in a democratic society?
participation to me would be when it's on an equal basis. In schools I don't ever really see the relationship as being equal between teacher and pupils for a start. And then about the people of different abilities are never treated as being equal. So participation can't really work on that basis.
I went to a grammar school, like, you know, where it's really pompous places where it's all our levels or nothing. And even there, if you weren't like the top of the class, you were just nothing. You know what I mean? You just didn't even care, nobody even noticed you were there, and they didn't bother.
I suspect that our junior and infant schools are really quite good, and that the kids are very involved in the kind of development of the school and all very active and treated with a lot of respect. And I think there's something gravely wrong with the secondary school system. I think it's the domination of the examination system. It means everyone's categorised and it's all about succeeding at some exams at 16, and the exam structure is designed to fail a considerable proportion.
No, it doesn't prepare them for what it's like for the real world.
Because if once you've left school, that's it, they've shut the doors on you.
They don't want to know, definitely don't want to know.
Because the things you do in school, you might do maths that might equip you, or English or something, but things like geography and history and things like that, they ain't going to help you in life. You don't need them kind of things.
Lots and lots of options should be available, and the way in which you study any particular subject should be very responsive to what you're interested in. Because history is masses of different things, or geography. There's a million different ways of approaching any subject. And the way in which people study should be built around what they find interesting, rather than some preset textbook about something that might be very irrelevant to their life and experience and background. So it's a style, the whole style of learning that needs shifting to be more participative.
There's kids there and they don't like what they're doing, so they just end up wagging their lessons or walking out or not even doing anything in the lessons, just cause trouble all the time.
If we had a real say in terms of the sort of things that we discussed at college, we'd be discussing far more of the sort of relevant issues that youth today face, like the problem of, the police in our streets, the problem of drugs, the problem of all those sorts of things, rather than a lot of the dry subjects that get discussed. But obviously, I'm sure they don't want us to discuss those things, and so that's always kept out of the curriculum.
I think that under the constraints of educational spending cuts, it's very difficult for the most well-meaning of authorities to develop an alternative curriculum to the one that we sort of fall into by accident. And an alternative curriculum to what is happening already ought to include a greater willingness to allow youngsters to be bloody-minded in their questioning. We have built into our education system, and I suppose it's a quirk of history, but we have built into it an authoritarianism that doesn't allow youngsters to think for themselves, or to question, or to ask the awkward questions. It's been a teacher knows best education system. And I do believe that if we're going to uphold any kind of democratic principles in this country, you've got to have politically aware young people. Now, I don't necessarily mean party politically aware, but youngsters who are aware of where they are in their own society, what their rights are, what information they can get about jobs, about the kind of family life they want to lead. A lot of young people come out of school not able to apply themselves to the society they live in. And I do believe that under the kind of expanding resources that ought to be going into education, you could look seriously at an alternative curriculum to what we have now. And I do think that in the end, a questioning group coming from school will be a benefit to society and not a threat to society.
anti-racist policy as students
Yeah.
in our autonomous body,
Right.
but thereby the college has to have their own sort of policy which is passed through the council, and that's passed. All the other colleges use that.
Right.
Now, I don't know how much that implementation of that policy has been done, but I know there's a lot of problems in the college, and then I mean, like, what I'm concerned is that the principal doesn't see them. I mean, like, for instance, in the common room there's only Asians and blacks use the common room, and yet that's the only place where spot checks are being held. So you get the sort of students going away from the institution, just using the common room as their little patch, like, call it their ghetto or whatever. And that's usually where ghetto is, you find oppressed people.
You don't change anything without action. So really, if you're talking about changing the curriculum, then the support for that change has got to come from the top. Yeah.
Over the past 20 years, research has shown clearly how the education system works in favour of the middle classes and against working class children. Also, the inbuilt bias against girls in schooling has come to be recognised. But it is only in very recent years that the problem of racism in education has begun to be addressed. For a long time, the complaints of black parents and children about their unequal treatment in the education process had been dismissed as, oh, they have a chip on their shoulder. Now, at last, there is official recognition, 2 major reports published in '85, the Swan Commission and the Eggleston Report, which look at how racism operates within the British education system. They point out how racism is the main cause in the underachievement of black pupils, and that it presents a major barrier to the full and equal participation of the black community in the education process. What is racism and how does it work in the education system? And what can be done about it?
If we do not deal with white pupils as well as with black pupils, if we don't prepare them for life in this society, we as teachers are miseducating those pupils. Because racism dehumanises and damages white people and gives them a wrong perspective.
When we talk about racism, we make it sound as if it's something which has a life of its own and it's some kind of creature which is crawling around. That isn't true. Racism is practiced and perpetuated by real, live human beings. In the case of Birmingham, those are the officers working for the authority.
People can racially discriminate. Yeah, but racism is more than discrimination. It's a systematic thing. I could say I'm not taking you out with me because you're white. But racism is about, well, I'm going to keep that group down, definitely, and I'm going to keep the power to myself. Yeah. Whereas as black people, we haven't got that power.
Racism in education tends to exclude black pupils as well as the black community at very many different levels. If we take, for example, the experience of black children in some schools here in Birmingham or any inner city in England, we'll find that the sort of curriculum that is on offer to black kids has nothing or very little to say about black people's contribution to history or literature or their religious experience.
See, it's all, education and knowledge has always been judged from the English standpoint, viewpoint. And, it's never been exposed to the people in general that from a different country, you're going to see things in a different way.
We were never taught anything about ourselves. We were taught about people like Nelson and all those people there. It has nothing to do with me, you know? And like, when we wanted to find out about ourselves, it was just not part of the educational system.
Neglect can be through ignorance, and neglect through deliberate policy of conserving our values, particularly in the areas of humanities, in terms of what is seen as literature, for example. Now, traditionally, we've thought of literature as anything in English. Sometimes we may have even translated works, and if you're lucky in some of the progressive ones, you may have Irish works being actually included. But very, very rare to find. It's very rare to find Asian works and Afro-Caribbean works taking side by side the place on a literature provision. Lately, we've actually introduced this, but unfortunately, again, they come in as a Mode 3 provision, which, you know, one could consider Mode 3 to be a very good provision, but in a sense, it's not part of what one sees as the main provision in literature. And as we know, that the structures which exist in this society, and the college is part of it, trade unions within the college becomes part of that structure, systematically exclude representation from black people. And
But still, what happened was that, you know, at this time now, you know, the education, we talk about the educational system, it's not as good as it should be. Anyway, for children to go to grammar school, they have this entry test, right, which is really, it's a nonsense test still. But what the problem that the headmasters have in the school is that they only say, how many girls in Birmingham that are going to go to, leaving school to go in secondary school is about 3,000-4,000, and there's only probably 150 spaces for those people to go in. Now they're going to take a test. And what he was doing was, he was saying to me that, you know, quite honestly, Mr. Martin, your daughter, she's an average child, but she doesn't really stand a chance of going into a grammar school because she's going to be one of the top 150, and, you know, and I said, cool. Right? Now what I said was, he then said that she shouldn't take the test and etc, etc. But what I said to him was that I think even though she doesn't have much chance, take the test because it's a challenge for her, right? And just, you know, just to give her that extra push. That's what I feel. I think that it would benefit her more to take the test. You see, some of the time it's not the end, the goal, but it's how you get to it.
Because there's a form of demoralization from their eyes.
That's what I felt.
We find that teachers actually say to themselves, well, we will, instead of putting black children through to doing O-levels, we'll put them through to CSEs. And therefore, right at the start, we have a process of elimination, so that very few children are getting through to O-levels. So the results, obviously, are likely to be that very few children are going to achieve, very few black children are likely to achieve good O-level passes. And black parents have said, well, that is racism. And it's obvious that it is an aspect of racism. It has to do with discriminating practices. It also has to do with how teachers have stereotyped black children. And of course, the end result is that more and more children are yet again alienated because of their experience of education.
And that explains what's happening to our young kids in the schools today. The oppressive environment in which they are forces them to be disruptive, forces them to confront their teachers. And do you know what happens to black kids when they do that? Do you know what happens to them? They are suspended from schools.
Policymakers tend to drag their feet ritually for years through committees, subcommittees, proposals, amendments, resolutions, before issuing a hefty report like Swan with a string of far-reaching recommendations. But recommendations and policies are sterile without the committed action of those with the power to change things? Is there that commitment to anti-racism here in Birmingham to put policy into practice without further delay? Or will the black community be expected once again to accept the rhetoric of equal opportunities while their children continue to be marginalised in the schools? In a society where young people are very low in the list of priorities and where their participation in decision making about their own education continues to be minimal, what hope is there for a future peaceful and democratic Britain?